Daniel sat alone at table 17, staring at a glass of untouched sparkling water while hundreds of guests celebrated around him. The ballroom looked like something from a magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. White roses covered every table. A string quartet played near the dance floor, while waiters moved between guests carrying trays of champagne and tiny desserts. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. Husbands leaned toward their wives. Parents danced with their children. Friends laughed together. Daniel sat quietly. He wasn't bitter. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. He checked his phone. There was one new message. "Daddy, are you at the wedding yet?" Daniel smiled. He typed, "Yes." A second message appeared. "Did you eat?" He laughed. "Not yet." The response came immediately. "You always forget." Daniel shook his head. His 8-year-old daughter knew him too well. He typed, "I'm going to eat now. Promise." Then another message. "Bring me cake." Daniel smiled. "I'll try." He put the phone away. For a moment, he simply watched the newlyweds dance. Marcus, his oldest friend, had invited him personally. "You have to come," Marcus had insisted. Daniel had initially refused. "I'll feel out of place." Marcus had laughed. "It's my wedding. You're supposed to be there." So Daniel had come. He had borrowed a suit from a friend because his own had become too old. He had polished his shoes until they looked almost new. He had even bought a small gift for Marcus and his bride. But he hadn't expected to feel so alone. 6 years earlier, Daniel's life had been completely different. He had been married. He had a steady career. He had plans. Then everything changed. His wife died unexpectedly, leaving him with a 6-year-old daughter and a life he barely recognized. Daniel had no time to fall apart. Lily needed breakfast. She needed school uniforms. She needed someone to attend parent meetings. She needed someone to check homework. She needed someone to tell her monsters weren't real when she woke from nightmares. So Daniel became everything. Father, cook, teacher, driver, comforter, provider. He learned to tie hair into ponytails. Although Lily still complained that his ponytails were crooked, he learned which cartoons she liked. He memorized her favorite songs. He knew exactly how much cinnamon she wanted on her toast. And every morning, before leaving for work, he checked her room twice, just to make sure she was sleeping peacefully. Tonight, Lily was at home with Daniel's mother because she had developed a fever. Daniel almost canceled the wedding, but his mother had insisted. "Go," she told him. "You need one evening for yourself." Daniel had smiled. "I don't know what to do with an evening for myself." She laughed. "You'll figure it out." Now he was beginning to wonder. He looked at the dance floor. Maybe he should leave. He could go home. Lily would probably still be awake. He could bring her cake. She would ask about the bride's dress. He would tell her it was beautiful. Then she'd probably ask whether Daddy danced. He would say no. She would laugh. That thought made him smile. Daniel stood. He was about to leave when someone approached. A woman in an elegant black gown walked across the ballroom. She was older, perhaps in her late 60s or early 70s. Her silver hair was pulled into a simple bun. A diamond necklace rested around her neck. She didn't wear excessive jewelry. She didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew who she was. Eleanor Whitmore, billionaire, investor, founder of Whitmore International. She owned hotels, technology companies, shipping interests, and a private investment firm. People waited months to get 10 minutes with her. Yet she was walking directly toward Daniel. He glanced behind himself. Maybe she was going to someone else. There was nobody behind him. She kept walking. Daniel sat down again. The woman stopped beside his table. "May I sit?" Daniel looked at the empty chair. "Of course." She sat. For several seconds, neither spoke. Daniel smiled politely. "I'm Daniel." "I know." His smile disappeared. "You know me?" Eleanor studied him. "Yes." Daniel became cautious. "Have we met?" "No." "Then how do you know my name?" She reached into her handbag. Daniel expected a business card. Instead, she removed an old photograph. She placed it on the table. Daniel looked down. Everything inside him stopped. The photograph showed a younger man standing beside a military helicopter. The man was Daniel. He was wearing a military uniform. His face was younger. His hair was shorter. But there was no mistaking him. Daniel looked at Eleanor. "Where did you get that?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she touched the edge of the photograph. "My son gave it to me." Daniel's throat tightened. "Your son?" "Yes." "What was his name?" Eleanor looked directly into his eyes. "Michael Whitmore." Daniel froze. The noise of the ballroom seemed to disappear. "Michael." A name Daniel hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. His closest friend. His brother in everything but blood. They had served together, trained together, laughed together, and survived situations neither of them had believed they would survive. Daniel picked up the photograph. Michael. His voice cracked. Eleanor nodded. He talked about you constantly. Daniel looked down. He was a good man. He said you were the best man he'd ever known. Daniel shook his head. No. Eleanor frowned. No. We saved each other. She smiled sadly. That sounds like something he would say. Daniel stared at the photograph. Memories flooded back. A desert sunrise. A helicopter engine roaring overhead. Michael laughing while they cleaned equipment. The two of them sitting on the hood of an armored vehicle talking about their futures. Michael had always dreamed about returning home. He wanted to open a restaurant. He wanted to get married. He wanted children. Daniel remembered telling him, "You'll have all of that." Michael had smiled. "You think so?" "I know so." Daniel swallowed. Michael never got the chance. He died during a mission overseas. Daniel had returned home carrying memories he couldn't explain to anyone. He had never spoken about it with Lily. He didn't want her growing up surrounded by stories of violence. He wanted her to remember him as her father, not as the man he had been before she was born. Eleanor watched him. "My son wrote about you in his final letter." Daniel looked up. "What?" "He mentioned you by name." Daniel's hands trembled. "Can I see it?" Eleanor reached into her bag. She removed a worn envelope. The paper looked old. The edges had been folded several times. Daniel stared at it. "Why do you have that?" "Because Michael told me to keep it." "For how long?" "Until I found you." Daniel's heart began pounding. "You've been looking for me?" "For years." "Why?" "Because my son asked me to." Daniel stared at the envelope. He opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first line made his eyes burn. "Daniel, if Mom ever finds you, don't let her give you money." Daniel laughed softly through his tears. "That sounds exactly like him." Eleanor smiled. "He knew me too well." Daniel continued reading. "If you're reading this, I'm probably not there to annoy you anymore." Daniel stopped. He wiped his eyes. Eleanor looked away to give him privacy. Daniel continued. "You once told me that a man isn't measured by what he owns, but by who depends on him." Daniel remembered saying those words. "You have a daughter now. I know because you told me about her. You were terrified of becoming a father. You shouldn't have been. You were always the kind of man people could trust." Daniel couldn't continue for several seconds. His vision blurred. Then he read the final section. "If anything happens to me, I want you to promise me one thing. Give your daughter the life you never had. Don't let guilt become her inheritance." Daniel lowered the letter. Eleanor was crying quietly. "My son loved you," she said. Daniel nodded. "I loved him too." Then Eleanor said something that made him look up. "He left something for Lily." Daniel's expression changed. "What?" "A trust." He immediately shook his head. "No. You don't even know how much. I don't want his money. It isn't charity." "Then what is it?" Eleanor looked at him. "A promise from one friend to another." Daniel stared at her. "I've worked hard to provide for my daughter. I know. I don't need someone to rescue me." Eleanor smiled. "My son knew you would say that." She paused. "He didn't want to rescue you." "Then what did he want?" "He wanted to make sure you never had to choose between paying a bill and giving your daughter an opportunity." Daniel looked down. He didn't know what to say. For years, he had quietly worried about money. Not because he wanted luxury. Because Lily deserved choices. Music lessons. College. A safe home. A future that wasn't limited by the size of her father's paycheck. Still, accepting help felt wrong. Eleanor seemed to understand. "You don't have to decide tonight." Daniel looked at her. "Why did you come to me here?" She glanced toward the wedding crowd. "Because I saw you sitting alone." Daniel smiled. "I was fine." "I know." She looked at him carefully. "That is what worried me." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "You've spent so much time being strong that you forgot you are allowed to have people beside you." Daniel didn't answer. Eleanor stood. "Come with me." "Where?" "I want to introduce you to someone." "Who?" She smiled. "My granddaughter." Daniel hesitated. "I don't think." Before he could finish, a man's voice interrupted. "Eleanor." They turned. A well-dressed, older man approached. He was the father of the bride. His expression was tense. "What are you doing?" Eleanor remained calm. "Talking." "With him?" Daniel stood. "Sir, if there's a problem." The man pointed at Daniel. "There is." Several nearby guests turned. Daniel's stomach tightened. The man's voice became louder. "This man doesn't belong here." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "Careful." You don't know who he is. I know exactly who he is. No, you don't. The man pulled out his phone. He has a past. Daniel's face changed. Eleanor looked at him. Is that true? Daniel didn't answer. The man smiled. See, the ballroom had gone quiet. Daniel looked toward the doors. He had spent years trying to bury that chapter of his life. Now, somehow, it had followed him into a wedding. Eleanor stepped closer. Daniel. He looked at her. Tell me what happened. Daniel lowered his voice. Not here. She nodded. Then we'll go somewhere private. But before they could move, the man said something that stopped Daniel cold. We all know what happened the night Michael Whitmore died. Daniel slowly turned. The color drained from his face. Eleanor stared at the man. How do you know that name? The man smiled. And Daniel realized the billionaire woman hadn't approached him by accident. Someone had deliberately brought them together. Someone who knew about his military past. Someone who knew about Michael. And someone who desperately wanted Daniel to remain silent. The wedding music stopped. Hundreds of guests turned toward them. Daniel looked at Eleanor. She looked back at him. Then she quietly said, Daniel, I think it's time you told me the truth about my son's final night. And for the first time in years, Daniel realized he might finally have to reveal the secret he had carried alone. Daniel looked at Eleanor for several seconds. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to tell her that Michael had not died because of a mistake he made. He wanted to tell her that Michael's final night had been covered by a classified report that contained only half the truth. Most of all, he wanted to tell her that he had spent years believing the truth would destroy the lives of everyone connected to him. But the wedding ballroom was filled with hundreds of people. So Daniel leaned toward Eleanor. Not here. She nodded immediately. Come with me. They walked through a side door into a quiet hallway. The bride's father followed. Eleanor turned sharply. You stay here. The man stopped. You don't